All right, we are officially recording. I'm here with Tamara Thorn of Heal Thyself Gardens, and we are joined today by Eric from Humboldt Kind Farms. Super stoked you could join us, Eric, on the hottest part of the day. How's your hot part of the day going?
Actually, it's going pretty good right now, but I'm in Hydesville, so it's a piping 63 out here right now. We're like 2 days away from our first harvest, so the turfs are just getting preserved as they milk up, and couldn't really ask for a better finish to our beginning of harvest.
Well, we're really stoked you could join us today, Eric, because we just had our Regen Sesh and Cured Cup qualifier over the weekend down in Oakland at the Lotus Entheogenic Church. And you were our first place winner at our very first Cured Cup qualifier in our open solventless category. You really brought the heat, man. It was a super stacked competition this month. Yeah, this is a competition we host between our vendors to win a seat at next year's Cured Cup, which we're going to be hosting in May, end of May, beginning of June, probably out in Nevada County again. And you brought the fire, brother. You're coming out of Humboldt County. We want to hear some of your story and hear about this incredible area that you grow in and your genetics. Last month, you came out and took first place at the Transbay Challenge, Jimmy Devine's contest at Area 101 in Laytonville. And that was your first time competing and came out and spanked some ass, dude. And you came out this weekend and really took top of the pile on some incredible hash. These entries could have won at any competition around the country. Super impressive. You showed that entry on a post last day or so, showing how that was made. We want to talk about that. But yeah, big ups to you, brother. Congratulations. You won an 8-bag set of 32-gallon wash bags from the Press Club. You won an Aero Mixer. Yeah, some awesome prizes from our sponsors. And you're going to be competing next May at that Cured Cup, brother. Huge congrats to you, bro. And tell us a little bit about that entry and get into some of your story. Tell us how you found your way to Humboldt and making this fire herb and this fire hash.
Yeah. First off, too, thanks to all the sponsors. I was totally blown away that we won anything. I was like, oh, normally I'm like coming in these competitions and you're paying money to enter, and just the fact that the way you had it set up is hella cool. If I definitely recommend anybody that's thinking about entering or coming down to one of your events, totally worth it. I had a great time and super cool vibes. A lot to talk about. First off, with like what we're doing and entering competitions right now, and like kind of making our own hash. We've been making frozen material for like about 6 years now. We started farming around 7 years ago, and that process wasn't necessarily for fresh frozen. We were just kind of like, hey, we're in the cannabis industry, we want to make flower, let's make flower. And then kind of started like learning more about hash and the processes it takes to make it, and realized that my climate and the way that I like to grow is like really lends itself to that. So we started focusing on making frozen material and working with hash makers and learning through hash makers how to make better frozen material. And as we've like developed up and added more flip strains to our menu and growing more frozen each year, still like not a super huge quantity. We're on 20,000 square feet. I started needing to have my material like tested reliably. So I just partnered up with, some really good hash makers. And I finally got a guy like Chris, MC Chronic, who, kind of working really closely with him to test material as it comes down and goes in the freezers. So we know what we're harvesting before I ever try to even take that to sell to anybody else. And of course we end up with some hash and rosin out of that. And that's what we have to now have fun with and compete with. And that's where we got, like we've just been running through a lot of our earlier stuff that we harvested this year in our, mixed sliders. And then we had, some material from last year that we've been playing with and just testing yields. And it's really opens my eyes to how the hash process is really going on from inside the hash room, and not having to wait super long time to get information back and see the material firsthand and be able to see the different microns And the way Chris washes is just like completely next level. When he first started talking to me about his practices, I didn't even understand. And then when he started showing me in person, I was like, wow, this guy's really like, definitely ahead of the curve of where I think like hash makers will be. Like people will be replicating like what he's doing in 2-3 years from now, because it's just so much more able to what's the right word I'm looking for? You can really tailor the wash system to the strain, right? And figure out how to get those yields. So there are other people that are still washing like on that level, but I don't see most people I talk to are not doing what we're doing right now. For the material that we entered, that was a pretty fun entry. Back in the day, I've entered into competitions in the past with like other hash makers, and most notably probably like Jillian Crawl, who used to be the head of Papa Select for many years. We won a couple. Oh shoot, we're still on here. Yeah, whoops. We won. Sorry about that. We won first, second place for ice water full melt at Emerald Cup. We've won third place with Amarillo for ice water hash at Emerald Cup, and a couple other competitions here and there. So I've always been like competing with other people, but now that we have our own stuff, we can start doing more things. And yeah, going back to like kind of the two competitions that I've won this year, like the entry competitions at the Trans Bay and now yours, both of those, like, yeah, we did a pretty cool entry. And I had been seeing, and like even talking to Chris, like we were seeing like people entering into competitions and doing like these rosin art kind of entries. And at first I was like a little like, when I first heard it, I was kind of like, I don't know, this seems like a kind of weird, but then at the end of the day, when I started thinking about it more and like saw like their passion that they had when they were making it, and I was like, oh no, this is kind of like just a cool way to express the material. And Chris even brought it up before. He's like, if like he entered in a competition where everybody had to enter the same strain, same plant, material that was harvested, and how do you stand out in a competition with 30 people? You start making your jar look unique. So this one that we entered into, it's kind of getting nicknamed like the cinnamon rolls. Kind of looks like a little swirl on there. We had been washing. We washed some Cara, which is mimosa times GMO, or meat GMO times mimosa from Symbiotic Genetics. It came out some super fucking fire primo fresh press. And we took like a 5-gram sheet of that and try to get it like, evened out and squared, and really try to be delicate to not smudge it up and like, cause any permutations into fresh press. And then from there, we took a Hive 5-gram snake, and we smashed that down and just layered that over the fresh press. And kind of going back and forth between the freezer, in the freezer, out of the freezer, in the freezer, out of the freezer, still in a cold room, but just to keep the material really workable. And we began to slowly just kind of roll that up. And yeah, just from there, we're like, how do we, it took we were like really going back and forth on this process a lot. Like we knew kind of what we wanted, but we weren't really sure how we were going to get there. And, we just really collaboratively kind of worked through the making process of this. And it was a lot of fun, a big, fun experiment. And sometimes, when you're working with the rosin, like we know, like you only get one shot, when you're working with this material to nail it, because like once those things kind of smush together, you're never getting them apart. So, when we gave it the first snip, I was like kind of like worried that the end would just like seal up on itself and like turn into kind of like a little pill pocket. And I was like, well, if we get them like that, then we'll call them like little pizza pockets and throw them in there or something like that. But it turned out great. They opened up nicely. You could see like the whole swirl in there. We were kind of like thinking it'd be like a cannoli kind of esque, like oozing with the batter coming out. And yeah, we just snipped them up. They kind of made like perfect, like little 1-gram weights on each one of them. And we placed them in there gently. And The terps worked really well together with the mimosa, the GMO, kind of coming, through on the exhale with like the hive, which is the honey banana and papaya mix, really giving that papaya honey flavor, like when you kind of open up the jar, smell it, which is like, in my opinion, a really good sign of the hive being able to overcome such a strong terp profile of GMO. So yeah, when we kind of started smelling those combos together, we were pretty excited about it, and then everything was just like top tier, quality. So we knew we knew it was really good starting material. I had just at the Transbay, we entered the hive, just straight hive, and that was a really interesting entry too. And you can see that post that one got nicknamed like the hash flower or the rosin flower. And that one was a little bit more complicated to make and a little bit more in depth, but that was a 3 textured entry where we made a rosin ring. We made a thumbprint, essentially a batter with a jam thumbprint with cold cured and fresh pressed rosin balls around the side with a fresh press lid on top of that. That one was pretty wild, and we made that one like kind of under the gun. We didn't really have much time to think about that one, and somehow we pulled that one off, and I was like, wow. But every time we're entering these competitions, I don't know if I was talking, I think I was talking to Joshua. Is that Joshua in here too?
Hey, good to see you today.
Nice to see you, dude. Yeah, I was talking to you, and I was saying, I would be interested to see, like, in the future, if like some competitions say, hey, no rosin art, because I definitely feel like it, is like a presentation factor, which I think is like, it's fun to do. It's like an expression of like what we want to do, and like we can do something fun with it. But if it can, I think, like skew people's perception on like, ooh, a shiny, like, we know how like sticker trapping happens all day in our industry, right? Like, not trying to do that necessarily, but just have fun with the material and showcase it in a new way. So I'd be interested to see if somebody has like a competition that makes a case for no rosin art. But I like doing it, and I like kind of having fun with the process of doing it. But yeah, we're stoked. Like you were saying, that the competition, there was some steep competition. I saw Joshua; he took second with his honey banana, and I tried some of that. It was felt good to know like, hey, we beat some proper honey banana. It feels really good because it's definitely like a cut that has a lot of like recognition for its like amazing terp profile and quality of resin. So knowing that we hunted the hive, the Caracara was that was like a breeder selection by Symbiotic Genetics himself. Knowing that came from him too, and that these we're working with like really fire genetics too, just feels good. You have any questions about the entry? I mean, I could talk more to you about how our farming practices and kind of what we do, or what else would you want to know about?
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Eric. Yeah, I'd love to hear just the passion you guys are putting into this and all the thought process behind it. So much goes into it, especially when you're competing. It's one thing just growing for flower and resin, but when you're actually thinking, how am I going to compete? It gets even more strategic. And yeah, a fun competition like this where it's open to any type of solventless. Yeah, presentation, sure, it can absolutely play a role into this.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that these judges don't judge on looks alone, as we saw with the flower competition. And I didn't get to judge. I smoked almost all the entries, but I did talk to some judges who said they really enjoyed the different consistencies of your entry, Eric, as they dug into it, of that cinnamon roll, the fresh press, cold cure together. It made it a really fun dab. And that picture I just put up there showing the fresh press and then the cold cure on top of it was really cool.
Yeah, that's kind of like, I think people, really like, I like to smoke rosin. I'm not like I've always been like, first off, like a flower guy, and talking with Chris, I'm like, Chris, what would drive you crazy? And he's like, dude, if I had this and this in the same jar like that I think that would drive me crazy. I'm like, all right, let's figure out how to make that vision come true here. And Chris, he's a real fucking hash nerd, like biggest one of the biggest hash nerds I've met, and really can like get into the different, like, what makes each kind of consistency special. I mean, he spent so much time working with them and making them. That you know, kind of really helps us understand, like, well, maybe this is what, you know, and then it's good to know, like, hey, like, what we like, other people are liking too, you know. So feels good to know that that's working out. So good to know. And one of the reasons too, I did the cinnamon roll and try to make it a little bit less busy than the last entry was. I heard some feedback when we made the rosin flower that, hey, only kind of some of the feedback I got was, you know, if it kind of got a little distorted, then I'm not sure which portion of the one I'm trying to take. And since we had, like, you know, 6 or 5 individual cinnamon rolls in there, I figured there would be like one to, you know, enough for each person to kind of really mess with without it like destroying the whole piece in itself. And they could really understand, like, oh, it's cold cure with the fresh press on the outside. And then maybe I'm thinking about, if I did the same thing, maybe I would spice it up with like some jam in there somehow or something too, you know, just to give a, you know, more of like a impression of the terp on just like the, you know, heating of the banger and like just opening up the jar. So different ways to play around with it for sure.
Well, yeah, people are definitely giving compliments on the consistencies and the right amount there. You know, yeah, you get too much too much fresh press in there, it can get a little tricky and a little sticky. And
yeah, that was totally planned on that. Nervous, we just kind of were like, put it down. Okay, I mean, like, I guess maybe, like, does that look right? Yeah, that looks good. Okay, let's roll it up, see what happens. Okay. Yeah, just, it was fun rolling it, you know, when Chris was over there and he was like getting it going and like got the first edge going on it. It was really cool to see it like kind of happening. And then we had the log and we had like the whole log rolled. I'm like, okay, now what? And we're like how do we cut this thing without destroying it? You know, I'm like okay, just like going at it, attacked it with the scissors, and it worked out. So.
Oh, well, it came out great. Thank you, Eric. I want to talk to Josh here for a minute. Joshua, sure. Cannabis Fine, I'm super glad you could join us today. Josh, you won first place for flower at our very first Cured Cup a couple of years ago at our farm here. And we're stoked you came back for this monthly Cured Cup qualifier in Oakland and got second place with your incredible honey banana rosin. We got to take a little bit home. Actually, we're gonna dab a little bit of it while we talk to you. Yeah, really stinky, brother. Heavy on the banana. Like we were saying to Eric, this was a steep competition. There was no slouches. There was no soft jars on that table. Any one of those could have taken the win that day. And it says a lot that those judges picked you guys for 1 and 2. So we're super stoked you could join us today. You gave a fabulous talk at our event on Saturday at the Lotus Church, all about permaculture and community and connecting to your land. I know you're building a new farm right now. It's been really fun to watch your new project develop over the last couple of months. How are you today? How's the hottest part of your day going for you? Tell us where you're at today.
I'm in a very hot part of the country. I'm in Redding, which is at the very northern tip of the agricultural Central Valley of California. So all of that heat builds up, and so much of that land is raw and barren and has been mistreated by modern agricultural practices. It's gotten hotter and hotter. There's tons of pavement, and so Redding gets the final push of all that air up in like the northern tip. And I came from a cattle family here in Redding, and I'm in my grandparents' house. My great grandparents passed here, and oh man, my phone might be having an issue. Hopefully not. And my grandparents passed in this home, and my mom lives here, and my cousin's living here with her now. And I'm able to go down to these California events because I have my family here, which helps me travel. There's not a lot of Oregon people down at this space and in general. So it's always like, for me, I guess it's a privilege to come down and represent what I believe is the northern tip of the Emerald Triangle down with you guys. There's so much amazing talent, such a great community and culture. I'm going to go grab some Cool Pack. I'm going to be back in just like 5 seconds. Excuse me.
It's definitely hot out in Redding right now. That kind of talk about while Josh was gone real quick too, like where we're at in Hydesville, like Colada area, it's more of like right off of the coastal break. So we the hotter it gets out for Joshua out there, the more it pulls moisture over us. So like when we had that heat wave, it can kind of dry out over there, and that will kind of sock us in for a few days, and can cause us like cloud coverage that pulls over us. So it's like 64 degrees here today, Joshua.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, crazy.
Oh, that's a cool climate to farm in. I enjoyed some amazing cannabis back in the day that was grown on the Smith River, about 40 minutes, 30 minutes inland from Crescent City and Brookings. And oh my gosh, they grew beautiful hazes there. They were isolated by a mile, and us kids used to hike in fertilizers, wood stoves, all sorts of things. And we had to cross a creek and a river while doing it. It was a pretty cool project. Yeah, Mar and Wakim, I think of them all the time. So yeah, I guess let's see, Honey Banana. Yeah, thank you. I guess it's hard to not talk about Eric's product, and I have the hive that I've been smoking, the papaya on the Honey Banana, and it's the resin is so clear, it's so clean. I like don't even really need a Q-tip almost in my banger afterwards. It's such a beautiful product. I think it's just very refined. It was really great to get to know you, and look forward to kind of seeing your products more out there and just purchasing more of your products. So yeah, I guess it was definitely a privilege to sit second behind such a quality product. I think again, it's hard to not talk about all the different quality people that were in the room that day. There was a blueberry from a local guy that was like, ah, man, I'm sorry, I'm gonna mess this up, but it's like Greenier or something, and he
That
was
was
45.
yeah, Humble Greenery and collab with Full Flava. And that was a blueberry streusel. That's actually a Kush Kirk and Amanda Reed strain, our breeder friends out of Southern Oregon. So big ups.
Man, I thought that was very, very good as well. So to be, yeah, so it just was really quality work. I've been smoking on that blueberry a lot, especially as I was leaving the Bay. And in the Bay, I was like, man, I got to smoke some true Bay Area terps. And I was hitting that blueberry all day. And the honey banana is a beautiful plant to grow. It's like very, very vigorous. I'm learning to refine my hash making practices. That's really where I'm at in my journey right now. I've been a soil farmer and analytical data collecting soil farmer for over a decade, and I come from an educated um, family of agricultural people as well. And the women in my family have agricultural degrees, and so that was always my focus. And I have enjoyed like really healthy gardens. I've enjoyed really rich, really quality flower. And I definitely was naive getting back. I started washing bubble hash 17 years ago and getting back into the rosin culture, very, very focused over the last 4 or 5 years. And getting really focused in the last 3 years. I was really naive to the skill set, the quality that all of these incredibly talented people, especially in, all over the country now, but Northern California, have. And so I've just really been learning a lot, and seeing this art done. I honestly went and drank coffee and had thumbprint pastries and bakeries for a whole day in Berkeley afterwards. And I was like, humble kind is definitely correct. This art is beautiful, and most of the goods on the planet that we truly love, we present in some art and beautiful way at some point. And I have been appreciating like just seeing the relationship between pastries, goods, and then also hash. And candies as well. There's definitely a relationship between these industries and these art forms. So I guess that's what I have to say about hanging out at the Lotus Church. And I'm sure you, what questions do you have about the honey banana?
Is that the clone you gave me? Do I have the honey banana?
Yeah, that is the clone. It's the, I'm sorry, I can't go back further into the lineage of this one and who took that cut and everything like that. I got it as a tissue culture cut a year ago. It's a healthy plant. It was producing huge for me, like 14 feet in all directions. Really vigorous plant. The resin is very beautiful washing it, around 4%. I think if I was doing a more dry farming practices, the yield would be higher as well. Growing the huge plants that I grow, I think that my hash yields can be a little lower sometimes because I'm using so much water to get the plant to that scale. Anyways, that's one of my intellectual things that I'm paying attention to right now on my farm and doing more research on.
I think like not to say anything, I haven't seen enough like dry farm resin, but just from like the limited amount that I've seen, the dry farm resin, you do get a lot of resin in it, but I think the resin can sometimes like suffer if not done properly. Like it just kind of comes off a little bit more waxy and not quite as clean in the banger. It maybe get like a little bit more like off terps on there. And I mean, I'm all in the mindset of like water till the end. Don't ever let a dry back happen before harvest on especially if you're going for hash, right? And in any kind of like hash collection. You want those plants to be wet. And I don't, for me, like having I had a 7% yield because I had a dry back, like doesn't mean jack diddly. It's all about resin per square foot, especially when we're just trying to keep the heads as like moist and juicy as possible, because the process of that plant pulling that water up and the VPD of the moisture leaving, if you start underwatering at the end, and it starts like pulling moisture back into itself, you could potentially be damaging trichome heads and causing those heads to like build more of a waxy film up around themselves than you may want too. So I think water, within reason, but keep that soil moist up until harvest for sure.
Yeah, so being an outdoor farmer in Oregon, after October, generally speaking, not every year, most years our soil's moist. So it's more of the farming practices up until, because I'm a full-term outdoor farmer in Southern Oregon, we have wet falls. And so I'm more speaking to my farming practices through July, August, and into September. I grow like 20-foot tall bushes, 15-foot tall bushes, and I'm more considering a drier plant. It's going to be about like a 10-foot bush, not for ease of harvest, but for looking at the structure of the plant and the resin of the plant.
Yeah, Josh, that's fascinating to me. I've got a lot of history as a big plant grower back in the day, and we always had people saying, "Oh, you're growing so much stem, and you can grow higher quality on a small plant." There's certainly lots of advantages to growing small plants, and certainly growing big plants came around at a time when we had to maximize our plant counts. We were only allowed to grow a certain amount of plants. A lot of those techniques really got built up around that time. But yeah, I'm still, having to grow big plants whenever possible because I'm still held by personal plant limits as I'm in personal use these days. We got Bert joining us, our lead judge from this weekend. We'll be hearing about the competition from Bert's end of things here shortly. And we got Eric back with us.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Josh from Cannabis, fine. No, you're all good, bro. But yeah, what are your thoughts on that as well, Eric? I want to hear from our cultivators here. Big plants versus small plants for resin. Is that as much of a factor? You guys were just kind of touching on that a little bit, or are all these other factors much more important? Temperature, light, light distance, whether that be the sun and the time of year, and indoor or outdoor, and depth, or What are these things? Harvest time. What are your guys' most important factors? And does plant size really play a point in that?
I don't. Like Joshua was saying, like I like
I don't know if Eric's still with us.
Can you hear me? I'm here. Hello. Hello.
I
can hear you.
I can hear all you guys just fine. I'm gonna
I can hear you, brother.
real quick, Josh.
No, I guess
Joey, can you
it's
hear
you
me?
and me right now.
Yeah, I can hear all you guys.
Yes.
Okay.
Joshua.
Yeah, I'm just hearing you and seeing just you right now.
Oh, wow.
All right, I'll hang on a second if you want to try to figure that out, Joey.
How's that look?
Yeah, just seeing you and just hearing you.
Yeah, I think you're on your end, Josh, because we can hear everybody else just fine here.
Maybe when I
Okay.
dropped it messed up Joshua or something. But
Yeah, Josh, you might want to bounce yourself back in and back out. But
Yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that right now.
yeah, go ahead, Eric. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, I haven't really grown myself too much. Only like last year, I grew some like full terms for like punch extracts. They were like, hey, we need some material. We're looking for like just some full term stuff. And I went up to like a partner, like a neighbor farm over here, and I was like, hey, I got to order. If you guys want to fulfill this order, I can provide some of my strains over there. And they washed a lot of them, and they said, hey, the yields came out great. Those were like true full terms, right? In the ground, like sometime in June, and went all year, harvested in late September, October. I think I've heard of stories of like that yields go up on bigger plants. Actually, that's kind of what I feel like I've heard in the past, and then I've also heard like they go down because there's so much distance for the water to travel, all this stuff. I think it really just comes down to like how gentle the climate is on that plant itself, and like how damaging it is to the trichome development. You see, you often see like, hey, outdoor weed is always like insanely high testing, but like maybe that doesn't look quite as frosty. But then you see like shaded grown like full term, and it's like fucking frosted like a motherfucker, right? So I think it's really just about like light intensity and temperature. And then also like dust factor is also another thing when it comes to like the cleanliness of the hash. So I think if you live in like, and you're going like a full term, and you live somewhere where it's hot, like let's say like Mendocino, like there's like hotter parts down there. If you have the ability to shade your canopy in like those earlier weeks of flower, and you're going to experience cooler temperatures later September, October. Dude, September can still be like ripping hot, and if you're week 4 in flower and it's ripping hot and it's throwing its trichome set out, you might be damaging some of those earlier trichomes that are coming through and like developing a little quicker. It's something that we kind of just get naturally where we live, because the clouds, like our par factor is lower than it is outside, just even 30 minutes further up the highway from us, like up the 36 or out in Honeydew or out in these other places where it's drier, because the clouds are just wisping over us all day long. Even if it doesn't look like there's clouds, there's clouds, a layer of cloud up there, and that is diffusing the light that's passing through. So it's a natural greenhouse cover that's also evapotranspirating, so it's cooling our climate as well at the same time. So I think that really lends itself to the trichomes really developing. We lose out on weight and like the total amount of biomass, and that also has to do with how much trichomes you're also going to produce. Like if your plants have a high VPD or low VPD, right, or wherever, if you're at the perfect VPD, right, so you want low humidity, right temperature, you will throw out a lot of trichomes for sure, right? Don't get me wrong, but if that intensity of the heat is too high to achieve that, I think you could be damaging some trichomes, and that's where like you'll get really like looking at too into the hash room. And this is like a lot of the data I've been learning more now that we've started like test washing all of our stuff, is seeing the percentage that falls into the 40 bag and like, the unusable like 150s that are like, in the beginnings. And some of the 150s are really good, and sometimes some of the 40s are really good. But if you just say like, hey, this is the non-usable stuff, we're looking at like 10% of our hash yield is non-usable. And like when we did like some test washes on like the dry farm stuff. I mean, this stuff wasn't really like handled perfectly, or like the grower that did it isn't really trying to do, fresh frozen harvest. He just had some space and I threw some rainbow belts out there. We had definitely like a 30% in like the 40s and in the higher, like the higher end and the lower end. So the percentage, I think, in the primo bags, if you're going full term in maybe not the most ideal weather, you're going to end up with a lower yield in a smaller sector of that hash range. So I think there's still like tons of experiments and tests that need to be run, and and data that's being recorded. I think a lot of times people do experiments, but the data is just not being recorded and it's not being replicated enough times to really like say this is a definitive thing. And even me doing it 7 years out here, the only thing I know definitive is that it's easier to grow plants from now till October than it is from May till now, right? And the resin, there's more plants that will do better if I go in my second round of harvest in the October harvest than there are plants that will do in the beginning time when I'm harvesting right now in July. So I'm selective because of that with what plants I plant in my first round of depths versus my second round of depths. And then I also have some mixed lighters that I run year round. And even in those, there's certain plants that do well and don't do well. And like one of those, like for example, like one of them is like papaya bomb. And if I try to do an early harvest on her, she will yield significantly less than if I do an October harvest on her and let her just like want to finish naturally, or like with like a kind of the natural cycle of the year. She seems to just always do a lot better. So yeah, it's really, I think it's really goes into the strains, the temperature, and the climate really play a big impact on overall hash yield. And size of the plant, I don't think that matters as much. Plant's a plant, it's going to do its thing. I could be wrong. That's my opinion.
Appreciate that, Eric. Yeah, I definitely, that's something I definitely want to be picking people's brains as we get them on here. I'm really curious about that. Like I said, we're back to trying to grow big plants because we're just growing for our personal six here and there, and trying to make hash when we can also out of the good ones. So
yes. I have an input for that for hash. I think it goes down to the phenos of what you choose for hash making. For my experience, for the people who teach me, the way we do it is to find the phenos of the strain and then try to find the one that's good for hash making, and then try to preserve that. But that doesn't mean that pheno hash is good for flour. That's the only thing. It's not really great for smoking as a dry flour because it's just gonna be so harsh. But for hash making, if you found that pheno, that's really gonna be a great hash making because it will give you more terps and more trichomes. And also for harvesting, for my experience, we harvest it and froze it right away. Like the plant is right there. And it's a greenhouse. It's a like indoor greenhouse with a shade and stuff. So we do it like really cool, dark, and even if it's hot, cut it down in a dark room and then freeze it right away. Not even like after cut it, like run right away to the freezer. Yes, and for the size of the plants, I believe that the bigger the plants is better for the hash making because it produces more trichomes. And if you want to do dry flower, for my opinion only, I prefer the smaller plants so they can really perform well to produce more. They will be more focused on their buds instead of just keep growing bigger. So I mean, also trimming will do a great help for producing those nice buds, so they won't waste their energy for just stretching and stuff like that. I think it's about the grower and how they relate the relationship with the plants and how they want to perform. I think it's about the cultivator too, how they're gonna produce the hash and the signature they have. That's why you are all right there. You are all true legends, and I noticed that you have all all that signature that you will really can tell that it's high quality hash. Every one of you have that, and you can really tell it. So yeah, I think that's my opinion only. That's what I want to
Right.
share.
Right. I think the other thing too is in just like if we're just talking about producing the hash as well, like I think if we're just talking, there's like a couple of different ways to look at it too. You're talking about, you can look at like yield, and you can also look at like quality of the hash that you're producing. And I think that those are like two different things that get conflated with each other. So I think like to really like solve the answer and everything, it's like you got to always put quality first, and then like yields got to come in second place to that. So I don't even know, like I like to think like when we're growing and doing like trying to use like regenerative practices, that helps produce more terpenes and more trichome heads that are going to be like the higher standard, that like, and that comes in like the phenos, like when you're saying like finding what phenos react and respond positively to our growing methods and our climate, that's going to do it. Like we cannot grow hazes, we cannot grow diesels, we can do them, but they go a long time, and we mold really easy out here. So we need like things that definitely want to finish on time and
Very true.
give us a head that is developed, that's going to be washable at the end of the
Yes,
day.
very true. Not all of the cannabis are washable.
No, and not
Not
and some
everything.
cannabis that's washable in another place is not going to work for me here in my
Yes.
location. I think that's what's interesting about hash and like outdoor hash, is that there is like regional hash. Like if I'm like, where did this sour diesel grown? And somebody's like, it was grown here, and I know that's a good area for sour diesel. I'm like, oh yeah, I want that, right? Boom, give me that. Or if it's like a really delicate terpene, and they tell me it's grown in a cooler climate, I'm like, that's okay, perfect. That terpene should really come through and be present there. Where if it was in a hotter climate, it might burn off and not be as present. Um, so I think that's like what's something that about hash that is just like you're not gonna, that nuance is maybe a little lost in the flower in consumption industry or smoke. I don't know.
You are located in such a unique terroir of Humboldt County. I grew up in southern Humboldt and Palo Verde on the east side of Garberville, very far inland, very hot and dry. Today it's probably in the 90s down there, and
Yeah.
you're in such a unique spot. If we're in a greenhouse down there, we're spending a lot of money to cool that thing and a lot of energy, and we do better with full term outdoor down in that direction. And you're
Yeah.
they're in a spot that is just perfect for terpene preservation, and that a hot day like this might be hitting 70 for you guys, and it's really cool to see the effect that's had on your hash. And I want to introduce our buddy Logan Chilterpiece. Thanks for coming in here, homie, and joining us. Another awesome farmer from up in Oregon. We're talking to a real deal farmer here, a Jadam farmer, educator. One of my favorite people to follow on Instagram, and always see what you're doing. And every year growing more and more food, more and more beautiful Jadam fed ganja. And you make it look so easy, bro, because it is so easy, right? But
Yeah.
tell us
Yeah,
about that special microclimate where you're at, bro, and tell us what's going on your farm this year.
yeah, dude. I'm like just trying to diversify as much as I can. I don't know if you guys can hear me.
Oh yeah, you're good.
But yeah, I took on. I've been doing this for the last 2 years. This like alfalfa project for Noble Dairy, which if anybody around here probably grabs their manure from there, So that's been really fun, and that conversation literally just struck up like as a normal farmer conversation. Like I met him at the feed store, like and so that's just been really awesome. Like I've been getting in this old farmer's ear that's been farming the same way for the last 40 years. He's been doing it organically, right? But like there's so many things that he could be doing. So I've been helping him like inoculate massive manure piles. He's allowed me to do some treatments on 2 different farms. So like for me, I've just been really trying to diversify outside of cannabis, honestly. It's like, if I really can't work for a quality organization, I might as well, like, there's plenty of other farming that can be done, So like, I still, just like you just said right now, Joey, like, I'm focusing on my 6 plants that I can grow, like, trying to make them 8-10 pounders. And just really focusing on that, and actually having a relationship with 6 plants instead of 6,000 is just, it's nice, man, to be honest, because I felt like I was kind of like whoring out the plant for a lot of years. And it's just been nice. Like I said, my educating style is less of like, do this, instead of, and it's more of like, hey, just watch what I'm doing, ask a question type of deal. And I feel like that's how I kind of like get through to some people. But yeah, man, this year I've been doing the alfalfa thing. I've been doing the peppers, and then I'm also doing a lot of vineyard work. So like, that's something that for me, I find a lot of like commonalities between cannabis and wine. And I find a lot of commonality because we're on both sides, both camps, people are connoisseurs, so like, they want the best, they want the absolute best. And it's just also funny too, because like, I'm sure most of you, Joey, probably a little bit more experience with this, is that people just claim themselves to be consultants just out of nowhere. They can, be European, they could be from South America. But they just, people in the wine industry are looking for some little quirk to like hang their hat on, to be like, hey, look, we're different. And so I found coming into the industry that there's like, biodynamics is really, really popular. And to be honest, it's not a system that I agree with. I've seen a lot of vineyards have absolute fruit failure, meaning that they do not, none of those grapes end up going into a barrel at the end of the year, because there is no nutrition to be found or to support the actual plant or the vine. And so it's been really interesting for me to hear, kind of in the same parallel of like, a lot of the failures that I saw people practicing 100% KNF, like, their flower's not finishing. I'm seeing some of the most unhealthy flower that I've ever seen grown, and then with a hashtag KNF next to it. And it's just like, oh, whoa, like, these plants aren't eating. Like, if you look at the NPK levels, the plants aren't eating. Like, you might be maintaining them, you might be giving homeopathic doses, but you're not going to finish a crop out on that type of stuff. So like, for me, these last couple, like 2-3 years, I've been really getting closer and closer to like AEA consultants, like John Kim's company. For me, like, that's where it's at, plant sap analysis. It's like telling a person that has something going on with them, like go take a blood test, like, go figure out what's actually wrong with you. And that's, I think, the type of agriculture that I'm trying to get in is more of like the science based of like, these are NPK levels, these are things that have been studied, these are like, this is your growth stage, this is where you need to be at nutritionally. And it's like, this has been done for us, and we can do this in organic ways. Like, we don't have to, I'm not saying that we have to go back to traditional synthetic conventional ways of doing things. No, not at all. But we can use things like parts per million levels, like in our feeds. We can really dial in our feeds and really create like nutritious, like, herb that can sit in a black and yellow until March or April, and you're just like, oh my God, this is just getting more fire. Like, that's possible, but that's creating nutrient dense cannabis. That's like, I can grow peppers, and those peppers can sit on my counter until January. Why? Because it's literally medicine in a capsule. So that's the shit I've been on. Like, I've kind of just tried to move away more from like the cannabis, like every single day type stuff. But it is nice. I do enjoy these conversations. I wanted to say one thing, I think, at least for my area, that I've been figuring out and like moving away from in the past years that I'm not doing this year is that I'm actually trying to grow things for hash, but to be processed like as dry material. So as like your typical OGs, your typical sours that just won't wash. Well, they won't wash in a fresh frozen form. Like, but if they're dried and you don't just, you're not manhandling that material, I think you can really have like a really nice product. And for someone who wants to smoke actual like herb that can get me high, like that can actually be a medicine for me, like it needs to be a strong OG. It needs to be a strong sour. So that's what I've been kind of like focusing on this year. So like in my ramble is stuff that I know can wash. I don't have I don't want to invest in a bunch of freezers and do that whole dance and stuff like that. So I just think if I can harvest at the right times, take off my tops for a little bit of flower, really let those lowers like really come out. That's for me. That's where I really like to like actually wash hash from, not just because it's a byproduct, but because I feel like it's just more concentrated terpene wise, more concentrated, like the actual terpenes that I want. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's who I am. That's what, thank you, Joey, for inviting me. Appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, brother, always a pleasure. Always exciting to hear what you're up to, and it's so cool to hear that you're working with the grape industry, the wine and grape industry, because that's one that we think could easily be turned on its ear. You have so much money in it.
Yeah.
People that are award winning and yet know nothing about healthy soil and are growing on these completely degraded, as you said, just nutrient devoid soils and winning awards. Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. We're down here in the corner of where Napa, Sonoma, and Lake County meets, and we drove through Napa on our way to the Bay Area and see these incredible, acres and acres of monocrops of this crap that we know they're spraying all kinds of sulfur and all kinds of chemicals and feeding who knows what's running off into the systems here. And it seems like that's an industry that there's money, and it seems like they'd be ready. And I remember reading about Mimi Castile. Is that her name? She's a winemaker up there.
Oh yeah, she's up here in Oregon. Yeah.
Yeah, she's in your neighborhood. She's the first one that clued me in that she was talking about natural wine as the new movement in the wine industry, but she was going to Italy and going to Europe and France and touring these world famous vineyards, and these farmers are showing her their dead soil and they're so proud of this dead rocks and there, and she's just thinking, oh my God, if these people knew the potential this stuff had to
really and if you look at it, it's their soil is really, it's not depleted. If you look at the actual like breakdown of it, it's actually really minerally rich. It's just the fact that we already know how can microbes access that for the actual the vine, but yeah, it's such a fertile soil, it's such a fertile area for natural farming to like come into effect, you know what I mean? But again, these are things that are going to have to be scaled up, you know what I mean? If you're talking out here, especially in the Rogue Valley, and we're on like the very small side, but you're talking most estates are 40 to 60 acres. So you're talking about putting in, if you are, because I've been talking to a vineyard in the Willamette Valley about doing this, and you are talking about, the good thing is that they've moved away from stainless steel fermentation tanks, and now they're starting to use these concrete eggs and stuff like that, and older oak and things like that. So they're like, well, I don't know what to do with these tanks. And I was like, well, I do. So there's I think there's just a lot of things that could be used, when they do fruit drop, when the actual winemaker and the viticulturalist get together in the same room, which is not normally an enjoyable experience. But they make a decision on the concentration on flavor that they actually want. And that ties in a lot for me of like growing chili peppers, in the sense like you don't want it's like having a huge lobster instead of a smaller lobster that actually has some concentrated flavor in it. You know what I mean? So it's controlling the growth, controlling it to where it's in enough of a concentrated space in the system that it can actually really create this flavorful, flavonoid rich, like terpene rich product at the end of the day. And that's what we're trying to do in cannabis, or what we've tried to do in cannabis for all these years. So I've just kind of like jumped into it in stride, and I like highly recommend anybody that has like enough growing experience where you worked with the plant for a long enough time. Like, you might not be a certified agronomist, you might not be a certified viticulturalist, but you do come to the table with a lot of plant experience, and that really can like move you forward in this industry, I've found, you know, because just in the last 6 months, it was just like, hey, come out here and like operate my tractors, which was fun because I love that. But then it was like, hey, a conversation to a conversation led into like some other things. So yeah, I think to be honest, I really want to go and work in Napa, because I just feel it's like, it's the top of the game. You have to be on point. And for me, like, that's why I've left operations before, growing operations, because it's like, dude, if you guys aren't going to be serious, like, I'm not gonna have the November regrets, where I'm like sitting up on the hill, like regretting the whole season because I didn't make a decision in May, you know? So yeah, that's what I've just basically been on. There's a guy that's going to come out that I'm going to start working with, a viticulturalist from Sonoma, that's going to come up here. And so we're going to start working together. He's going to like basically start running labor crews and things like that. And he's going to give work orders, and I'm going to handle those work orders for him. But it's going to be working with organic vineyards, because just like you said, man, like, if you think like the tomato industry or the strawberry industry is like you're dealing with just some really heavy chemicals, like the wine industry, you guys have no idea. And that could be all the way up until the point where it actually gets bottled. And like, they could have done this whole organic natural process, and at the very end, they're putting sulfates in it to preserve the wine. It's like, what the fuck?
What?
You know, it's crazy. But what I do love about it is that there's funding. I'm never worried about like where my paycheck's coming from. Like, it's none of this like, hey, I'll pay you at the end of harvest, which I just really wish the cannabis industry could like move away from that. And
tell me about that, please. Go on.
Who are these wine people so we can avoid them?
Oh man. Well, I don't know about
Oh, man.
the wine side. I know on the herb side.
Yeah.
Who to look out for, but no.
Yeah, we can avoid them.
Anybody who really just loves agriculture, like me, like, I could be standing in a field, and that to me is like a day off. Like, I just love that shit. I love being out there. But it's an industry that, like I said, you come in with any type of work experience, de-leafing, like that's half of the vineyard work is de-leafing and understanding where the actual rows are situated, and understanding where the sun is, and understanding where the fruit set is, and then creating that like equilibrium of like light, shade, airflow. So I love that shit. Like, that's what I was doing with greenhouses. It's like, oh, hey, fuck, we're like hitting afternoon sun's like getting crazy over here. Let's modify, like, that logistical side of it I really, really like. So yeah, even like, go ahead, brother.
Can I have a question? I'm sorry. Can I have a question? Let's go back to the soil. What do you call that soil that's, you know, so dry, but then when they wake it up, it becomes so amazing? Like those farmers, they do like, you know, like a rice. When you do rice, they just leave it alone after harvest, and then when they go back, they put hella water and then become like so.
Yeah, well, I would just say, I mean,
what do you call that soil? What do you call those?
I would just say that that's just soil in general. There's a guy called Steve Diver. If you ever like get to like look him up, he's a soil scientist, and I've been asking him these like questions for like years of like, like how do soils get restarted and like things like that, and also of if you're in
It's like a
mycelium,
jungle soil.
or not even that, bro. Like where I live, I don't live in the
Yes.
jungle. I live in the mountains, and I have seriously like hyperactive soil, like mycelium wise. But I've been able to do that by reseeding that main seed or that main area where I'm finding mycelium. I'm
Yeah.
able to seed that out to other areas. So I can do that like a number of ways. I could do that through liquid inoculants by creating like a JMS or like an EM1 type of situation, or you can do it as simple as like I will take big pieces of aggregate and I'll bring on sheep or I'll bring on cows for just like 2 weeks out of the year, 3 weeks out of the year. And I will put that around their feed. Anytime those microbes or any of that actually gets on their nose, what is that cow doing for the rest of the day? It's making contact with the rest of the soil around there. You know what I mean? So like I wouldn't say necessarily that there's actual soil that just like becomes alive again. Like, I don't think you're going to see that necessarily maybe in the desert. I mean, you will. There are microbes there. I just think it's once water is in the system, like those microbes that are in the desert, they've become drought tolerant. So the
Yes.
second that water is available, they're available.
They
So
be
I
like
think
be alive. They
I don't
become alive.
necessarily. I don't know if there's like just one soil that does that.
Yeah, like my approach that I've taken when in growing from like day one was I was always very interested in like creating like, you know, big roots, big fruits, right? And it was always kind of like what you heard. And so I was always really focused on dealing with like, how do I make this soil work for me as best as I can? And I just spend a lot of my time just researching how to create really healthy soil. And you know, given the fact that like, you know, even when I'm growing in greenhouses and I have heaters and, you know, fans and all this stuff, you're still subjected to the climate that you're given day by day. And the one thing that I was like, you know, we can always really try to dial in is our soil health. And if you take care of your soil really, really well, your plants will give you a good product, regardless of, you know, the weather that you're experiencing outside. And you really got to get in, you know, feed the soil, make sure the soil is healthy. The plants are they'll figure out how to, you know, what they need, and obviously doing a, you know, NPK tests on your plant and a nutrient analysis of your plant. You know, you can, as a farmer, as somebody with intelligence, you know, you can go in there and fine tune your soil biology and your soil nutrition after that point. But if you have healthy soil, the plant will take care of itself. It's really interesting in like the wine industry too. I feel like for like a lot of these got people that have vineyards and they do a lot of stuff. You know, I don't want to, you know, especially like I've definitely geeked out on wines for a while and gone to like some like seminars and like talking about like French soil. Like dude, they are really irate about what can be put in the soil, and what's in the soil classifies it as a certain type of you know, labeling on the bottle. And like, I mean, there's people that are like harvesting boulders and like putting them into their fields to have a certain percentage of like boulders to soil ratio, because the boulders like sink, and then like people come out and test the soil and they're like, oh, there's not enough boulders here, and they got to go down in the river and like grab the boulders and like bring them back up.
Which is basically just remineralizing the soil.
Again, you know, it just seems like, you know, they're doing things to like meet this standard that has been done for so long. But when I was like listening to this, I'm like, well, is that producing optimal soil health, or is it just like meeting the standards that you want to say, oh, to be a French whatever from this region must come from soil with this amount of, you know, type of rock in it, you know, and like
well, I think not to cut you off, but to have the conversation with you, is that honestly, I think a lot of like French techniques apply in France. Like
sure.
It's same for Korea to here. It's like there's certain things that we have to be able to adapt to. I don't think France experienced West Coast heat waves like we do. the how, you know, moisture is retained within soils and things like that is much different over here. And unless you're dealing with like a Napa, Sonoma, Southern Oregon, or the Willamette Valley, it's just completely different. And they have an idea of like stressing out the vines through nutritional and like basically like withholding water from the plant that they feel brings out this character. And that, for me, I don't agree with that. I think if the plant has, just like you're saying, like you've done your work, the soil has the soil health that it needs, it has the microbes that it needs, that and those microbes need water. They need, like, that's the basis of all life.
Mm-hmm.
So withholding that and having like microbe die off and things like that, like that doesn't sound. It just sounds like a drunk Frenchman came up with that.
Well, in the cannabis, man, like letting your soil dry out, you know, you're just inviting pathogens and other like nasty stuff to come in there and claim territory over healthy microbes. And
right,
everybody's dealt with like fusarium and sudden branch death and all this other stuff before. Right. It's like that's not good stuff. That's getting into your dirt. You know, that's bad. Yeah. And then definitely having the right moisture content allows the space for healthy microbes and mycorrhizae to colonate.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Joey, can I say this one last little thing I was gonna say about that Steve Diver? You good?
Say more.
Yeah. So it was a way, because I asked him about like the mycelium patches that I had in my soil, and if like I could propagate those in a liquid form, and he was like, he's like, I don't really see how that's going to happen, because what I'm seeing that you have, that's basically like a very like fungal rich environment that you would be putting into an aquatic environment, and you probably wouldn't be propagating those the way that you're thinking. But he said what you can do is like, so a lot of us, I think, we're either planting like winter rye or like oats or something like that as our cover crops. And what he said to do is those are going to have they're going to have an association to a certain type of mycelium that is going to grow. And I've noticed this, like if you grow it as like pasture or anything like that, that there's going to be a certain amount of mycorrhizal, like that you can see above the surface. That's basically within those first 2 inches of root system and actually like established root system below the surface of the soil. He says that if you can collect that and you can actually do a rinse. So if you were going to go out and like throw out cover crop, that cover crop that you're going to throw out, that you would rinse with that mycorrhizal seed, and that supposedly from there, that will be your mycorrhizal seed that you can seed out throughout your property. And this guy, dude, he's been like a soil consultant.
So what's the ingredients again? I'm sorry. What is it again?
It's just Steve Diver.
I'll write it down.
Yeah, dude, do it. I would. Steve Diver. This is a massive like gold nugget. Diver. But yeah, it's basically you're using your cover crop to inoculate your next season's cover crop or whatever seed you're using. And that way, that's a way that you can put that into like a liquid form, because you could wash those roots, that mycelium mat that you're gonna get regardless. You can come in and do a wash, get that liquid, and then with that liquid, use it as a seed treatment, and then that seed will go in and inoculate other areas into your farm.
Wow. So the liquid form, are they not gonna get contaminated if you put it in the wrong place, or you need to use it right away when you?
Yeah, it's a microbe. So like whatever that wash that you're using, it can be like aquatic or in an aquatic state for a little bit of time, but you want to use that. And it doesn't matter. It's going to dry on the seed surface or whatever, but that seed now is an inoculated seed.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, so you just spray it on your seeds and then let it sit there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And nice knowledge. Thank you.
You go to
Well, dude,
compost.
it's not me. It's not me. It's
Wait,
Steve.
if you were to take it and spray it on your
Well, it's
compost,
you
spread
who
the
introduced
compost
to.
out?
Yeah, I think you
So
can.
thank you.
It's in seed form at that point.
I
Okay.
see. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So Logan, what does that mean for JMS for Jadon Microbial Solution? Does that mean maybe not as effective as we think? I mean, that's essentially what you're saying.
Nah, dude. To be honest, I look at my fields and it's effective.
I mean, you've been spraying it up there for several years now, and I see your videos. You have that mycelium growing on top of the cover crop.
My aggregate below my soil is inoculated.
It's like a layer.
Inoculated.
I've seen
So like
chunks of it.
what I'm trying to do though is I'm trying to get like I think we've been so focused on this, like, well, we need to bring the fungal to bacteria rate. We need to bring it on the fungal side, the 2-to-1 side. And I do agree with that. But I also think too that there is a relationship that bacteria that is closer to the actual soil surface and the fungi before, they're like stepbrothers, or they're like brothers. They're just like cycling and they're moving things, and I think also that's how like water is actually moved too, and it's a signal of like, hey, we might need to pull a little bit more up to the surface and things like that. Like, I don't know. I don't think anybody else does, but I think that this is a way of not only, because I think with the JMSs, I think what you're really like, you're not breeding fungal spores, you're breeding like basically yeast at that point. But I think yeast is the building block that allows that fungal operation to like even like to kickstart itself. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think JMS is important when you're talking about your subsoil, when you're talking about like actually inoculating like below soil aggregate. That's like, and also too, if you're going to go in and like start an orchard or like something like that, like plant parts where the actual roots need to like dig into and actually need to have like some establishment, like I would be treating a new orchard ground a year or 2 years before they're actually going to go in there and plant. Or for a vineyard, go in a year, 2 years before, put sheep on there, do JMS treatments, do these other type of treatments, which there's still not a name for it. I'm going to grow. I have a full thing of oat cover crop that I've left on my farm, and I've just been irrigating it and stuff like that. I'm allowing it to go to seed and hoping that with the amount of mycelium that's already there and the amount of seed from the seed crop that's already dropped, that this process is already going to happen again. But I'm going to see here in October and November, once this like cover crop starts coming up again, what is the actual amount of like how real is this? Because I don't want to go online and be like, oh, I found this thing, and then like I don't care to put my name on it or anything like that. I just rather people use it, you know.
So you're saying like even like I know in about 2 years I'm going to expand out into like doing like a outdoor section in my garden. And right now it's just like grass hay that gets cut down and turned into hay bales every year. But like I could start now, just like this winter, throw cover crop on there and start.
I would if you would at the cheapest way.
Yeah.
Just don't bale it, cut it.
But just cut it, drop it there.
Just drop it, bro. You're taking nutrition off your ground every single time you bale it and take it away from your farm. You're losing nutrition.
Okay.
And I would say even on that, like, bro, there's all types of things. First of all, you can use JMS. I would use that in copious amounts. I wouldn't even mix it, bro. Like, give it full blast. And from there, I add labs also, because labs just is like it's a soil tiller. Like that's what it does. For sure. So if you can use that, you can use the labs first to kind of like till it open. The JMS on top of that to like sink into those holes. Mm-hmm. And then I would say also, depending on, I mean, you got to really do like soil analysis and stuff like that. But I found as as a microbial feed, I'm not even talking about like giving nutrition to the field, just as a microbial field of fish amino acids and sea salt, so that the microbes actually have something to like metabolize and poop out and continue this process on. Like, yeah, they can source from what's already in the soil, but I think that's a lot of times too, like people need to kind of like get in their head too, is that people could just really have shitty soil. Like you could give all the microbes you want, but if you are lacking potassium and zinc, like I don't care. And this is the thing I have with biodynamics. I don't care what way you pull something or what star is aligned with Mars, and like that, guess what? You don't have zinc. Like get over it. You know what I'm saying? So I just think, there's ways that you can do it, do a soil analysis, but like start really opening up that band, because
it's funny you say biodynamics, because like I had in wine, because like I bought a bottle of biodynamic wine one time, and this is not to talk about all biodynamic wine, but I was like, this is not good wine. This is bad.
Yeah, I mean,
I was like, ooh, cool, biodynamic wine. Let me try that. And I was like,
but bro, that you can take that to the same thing as like, I've tried some weed that people are like, oh, I grew this with KNF, and I was like, this is absolute trash.
Yeah, it's great. It has to be done right, It has to be done
One more question.
Go ahead, brother.
What do you guys think about the lactobacillus adding as a microorganism to your fermented stuff?
I use that every week. Every week I'm adding lab into my soil all day. It's the best thing there is. Easiest thing to make too. Milk's gotten more expensive, but dude, lab, so easy to make and rewarding to use on your garden. It's like you can't really overdo it either. It's for dummies.
Wow. Does that really increase your yield and like the terps and everything?
I don't know. Like because I've never done like a without and with, but I think like it definitely improves my soil health. I'll tell you that, and that's kind of where I was talking about before. It's like I'm focusing on the soil health. So if I see an improvement in the soil health, I'm gonna correlate that as like the plant is gonna obviously be better because of that, right? It's gonna be able to, take whatever it needs. So I inoculate with lab, through the course of like an 8-week flower cycle, it's probably getting inoculated like 5 times, at the very least.
You're mostly in greenhouses and stuff, but do you have to be aware more of PM or mold and be more aware of strain selection? Are you pretty dialed with your setups? Does that not even come? I know labs can really help with protection for powdery mildew and mold going into flower. And
yeah, we
bacteria on the plant.
We don't actually really spray the lab on the plant as much. We're more using like sulfur and diatomaceous earth, pretty religiously to combat pests and PM. And I used to have more issues of PM when I first started, not really understanding like how to like properly regulate the greenhouses and the space and like understanding proper airflow. But as I understood that, PM is like really not an issue for me anymore. In all honesty too, it's like if I were to ever rebuild greenhouses, I would like, you don't need dehums in your greenhouses. Like you can put them in there, but if you have proper HVAC, like heaters and ventilation, like you're moving way more humidity through heaters and heating your greenhouse and cooling your greenhouse than you ever will with a dehum, especially in a greenhouse setting. So like PM used to be kind of like, oh, do this thing, like I'll get PM in like the lowers and this, and I just started ripping that shit out. And then PM started disappearing, and then just spraying your plants properly. But lab is I know lab, it has the pH of it is really what's changing, making it a thing for the PM not to be there. So when you understand like what does PM need to grow, it needs the pH to be right and humidity to be right. And if you take one of those things away, then PM's gone. PM no longer exists on your plant. That's the same thing with a lot of with botrytis as well. Like if you take away one of the things that botrytis needs, then you will not have botrytis. At a certain point, like it's also like strain dependent too. Some strains are just going to be able to resist that and like tolerate it better. But yeah, like for me, like the biggest issues I had to learn how to overcome were PM and botrytis in the beginning, big time. And lab in the soil all day. Lab on the plants, you can do it. I find other things that I prefer to use.
So lab is lactobacillus, right?
That's for combating pests.
So that's
marginally.
lab. So lab is lactobacillus,
Yes.
right? Okay.
And
It's my first time hearing it. Lab.
it's the process of making cheese. It's like the microbes that come off of the cheese making process.
Okay.
But try to not look at it as like a fertilizer. Look at
Oh
it
no.
more as like a microbial inoculant.
Like I'll give you a great example. Like there's there's companies out there that will sell you, shelf stable powdered lab. And in order for me to inoculate my 10,000 square feet would cost me $100 per bag, right? Versus $12 at the grocery store in milk. So it's like, just do the math. If I'm just doing that, this is like 5 times a week, 5 times, 10 times a year on 2 spots. So that's 20 times, I'm saving like, at least $2,000 just in my field alone. And I'm controlling the amount of lab that I'm having. And I know it's like fresh living lab. And then you can use the lab on so many different things. I throw all my lab when I'm making like all of, like my fermented nutrients. I just throw lab in there just to get them going, and I throw them in my seed starts when I'm like cutting clones. I throw lab in my clone trays. I'm just throwing lab on everything. I just have so much lab everywhere. So
I'll try to mix the. I'll try to ferment yogurt to a JLF. Try to mix it there. See how it works.
Oh, it works great. Yeah, it works great.
I will do some experiment. Thank you. Thank you for the knowledge. I think everyone who's listening to are learning too.
Yeah, I made some pumpkin. Like I just started really messing around like this year with JLF, and I made like a pumpkin JLF from like some like I don't know if you know where Shively is, Joey. Right? Got some like Shively pumpkins for Halloween, and some of the most amazing fruit comes out of Shively, out of the dry farms down there. Chop those up, mix them with molasses, threw some lab in there, and then that's what fed the hive and everything too. And I think that definitely had like a huge impact on like the terpene quality and like how amazing like all of everything that came out of those greenhouses was like so good, dude. I'm like, oh my god. And we were feeding those greenhouses. We went pretty hard. We hand watered everything on those, and that got hand watered like every hand water, because that was like really the only thing we had going on, focusing on. But generally speaking, when we're growing, like right now we're so busy, I'll hand water. Everything gets hand watered once a week up until like week 6, and then we're just like drip lining for all of our other needs that we need to. But we're like making teas and then hand watering once a week going through. So just trying to get the good bacteria and good thicker like fish emulsions in there and stuff like that you just can't do through the drippers.
What's your base fertilizer that you're using?
The base fertilizer, like are
you using a line, or are you using like JLFs?
We just amend heavily into the soil.
Okay.
So we use Soilscape solutions, and we send out for like soil analysis, and there's micro adjustments that happen each year, but it's pretty much the same formula that they give me, and I just rely on them. I'm still like relatively new to farming and growing, and when I've been doing this now like 7 years, and I just try to add a new thing on every single year. And so I just from day one I just started with heavily amended soil, and kind of added more things that I could do myself on, and then if I'm ever in a need to like, hey, it needs something and I don't have that in an organic format, it's like I'll hit it with like cutting edge. But that's usually pretty sparingly done.
But cutting edge, they have 2 lines. Are you using like their louder powder, or are you using like their organic?
The original. But I use louder powder on another farm I have that just does like show flower. It does pretty good. I like it a lot. But I mean, I'm just using the normal stuff because I don't use very much, and so I'm just like, it's what we know on this farm and when I have the guys trained here, so we stick to that. But we're trying to use as much organics as we can and foresee what we need to do. But if there's like a snap thing that needs, then we just hit it with like cutting edge. But pretty at this point, like as the years have gone on, we've moved further and further away from using bottled nutrients to remedy any kind of problems that we're having in the grow. But like we just did a soil nutrient analysis at like week 3. Everything looked really good. So I was like, well, we don't need to change anything. Keep doing what we're doing.
Yeah, just a water only tea.
Yeah, water teas, and then just adding like, I cheat and I buy like pre-bottled freaking organic nutrients, and like I always forget all the names, man. They keep going out of business, all the companies I was using too. So we've been forced to start making them more ourselves.
Yeah.
Well, like the famous one just went out of business this year. They're done. They used to make soil amendments and like cattle. I know that like one of the things I always use was Catalyst, right? I'm blanking on the name. They were everywhere, but they just closed their shop, and they used to make organic flower nutrients, organic veg nutrients. But really, what it is like fish fertilizer and some sort type of like fermented plant extract. And I was like, oh, once you kind of realize what that is, like you can just go and make your own FPJ. You don't need that much of it to grow 10,000 square feet if you start with a well amended soil. And I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are making really quality resin that don't feed anything and just drip line water on a heavily amended soil. So,
Well, I was gonna say to you, that's how I set up my MPK to grow peppers at my farm. Is so I'll do, instead of going through and amending the whole field, what I'll do is I'll take basically the amount of amendments that I would put on the field, and I will make those into like a JLF. So for nitrogen, I'll make my feather meal out of that for my nitrogen.
yeah.
And then for my potassium, I'll come through and do fish bone meal, right? And then a lot of times, like even this year, I didn't really want to do this, but it's like soluble K or something like that. But it's basically like a 0060 organic potassium. But for me, and I don't need to make a JLF out of it, right? Because it's already water soluble. But just those right there, you can then also with like a ppm meter, and if you're feeding through a tank or something like that, you could basically just dose your tank. And then if you're coming through and you're saying, okay, I want like a 744, you can come through and on your ppm meter have that based on, you can pull out your 7% of nitrogen from your feather meal, you can pull out your 4% of fish bone meal, you can pull out your 4% of potassium, and you can treat your tank and understand through your ppm meter, what am I exactly feeding? Because you'll understand, I have that 7%. I put in the nitrogen, it's reading at this. I put in my potassium, it's reading at this. I put in my phosphorus, it's reading at this. And then you can go in and put in a little bit of silica. You can go in and put you know what I'm saying? Like you can really build your nutrient regimen for like in those times where you're saying like, oh shit, like I really need more phosphorus here.
Yeah.
Instead of buying something, you can have that in a liquid form that you can give in an actual, depending on your needs or something like that. If you're trying to give like a homeopathic dose of it at 400 parts per million or 500 parts per million, just to give it some support, right?
Yeah.
But you're not having to buy a product. You can make those amendments liquid form friendly.
We just started really started last year really making lab a lot more and using, got really off with that. At the end of the year, I started making just making JLFs or FP or FPJs, right? And then this year, at the end of this year, I'm going to start just trying to make more FPJs going into next year. But I've always been like just on the edge of like, well, how much of this am I really supposed to use? Like what's really the strength of this, and how do I use it? And I'm like been always like real low, just starting like 2 to 4 mils per gallon.
Right. But it's not to cut you off, but I think this is something that Joey, you probably get thousands of questions based off of that. I know that I do, is that people don't know how to feed with this. Like they know how to make it. They know how to post it on Instagram. Look, I made this amendment. Yeah. But how are you using it? Like, and at what strength are you actually using it? And that's what I'm saying of like, if you get a ppm meter, that does not lie. It tells you.
How do you know what the starting FOS of, like, let's say the pumpkin extract I made, how do you know what the starting FOS is? Like, okay, I have 4% of this material per parts per million here, but is it PPM is reading? How is it reading the phos content of that
Well,
starting?
it's not going to read out it's just going to read a parts per million. But that's you would have to understand as the person applying it, what is the biomass that I am applying? What is the constituency of that biomass?
Yeah.
What is it made out of? What is it rich in? And then from there, understanding and there's like a learning curve with it. It was for me. I was the first.
We've been going up. We've been noticing. Hey, we can increase these like how much we're doing parts per million. But I looked at it even when I was doing it on the low side. Is like I'm over here just trying to feed microbes and introduce different microbes that are going to be in this JLF, right?
But don't steer away from actually being able to use it as a base nutrient. That's my point.
That would be the end goal for sure, right?
Yeah,
it's like being able to just make our own nutrients, dude. It would be really tailor it down. That's definitely the end goal. I've just always been farming can be so difficult, and you always hear stories of like I started a farm and failed and all this shit, and it's like I was doing all this stuff and I didn't understand and I over nuded everything and burned everything. I'm like, first year, literally, I amended my soil and I fed water most of the time, and I fed I crab emulsion once, and I fed what I did a lot of was like Soil Pro and Flower Pro. That's what I did, and they were expensive. And then I realized like what they were, and I'm like, oh, okay, I could start buying these off the shelf in different cheaper formats. And then I'm like, okay, then I started getting more comfortable being able to build those things myself and buying everybody's like, you don't actually need this, or you don't need that because it's already being done, and just as like trying to feed microbes in the soil, rather, and like make sure the plants obviously have whatever NPK they have. And like people always said, oh, if you feed salts in your soil, you're going to kill all your microbes. I'm like, you might get like a couple die off, but if you have healthy, robust soil, you're not like draining it down with salts. Like your microbes are totally chilling. If you come back and re-inoculate again, you're going to you'll replenish what's there, especially if it's healthy, a healthy habitat for those microbes to live in.
Right.
So that's kind of where I've always been. And I'm trying to always learn more about how to, create healthier and better soil. And I think, kind of during that process, it's like just pushed me into like realizing like you just need to learn how to like ultimately, like you're saying, create your own nutrients that you're going to be able to like feed with, and that's going to ultimately boost up your soil health and like your biodiversity within there. Yeah. But then also like taking really good care of your soil over winter like has like huge ramifications going into the next year. 2 years ago, I was like, they all the park people were looking at me crazy because I was in the park raking up maple leaves and everything in our parks. Like, what are you doing? I'm like, I have a farm down the street. I'm just raking up maple leaves. And then last year, I just tried to use straw hay and no maple leaves, and definitely not nearly as good as finding leaves and doing a combo of leaves and straw. So probably going to be in the park again, looking like a crazy guy, just raking up all the leaves.
That's really good use of your local resources. Logan, I've got some questions for you, dude. You grow similar style to us, a lot of jadam. You've built some incredible soil over there the last few years. I want to know, what does your weekly feed look like? Well, before we get to that, getting back to the ppm meters, you were one of the first guys we saw using these, testing as ferments. We're at a place where we're mostly just doing a veg ferment, a transition ferment, and a flower ferment. I don't put anything in there that's way, if I'm only putting a little bit of comfrey in there, I'm mostly putting a ton of ganja and, a lot of nettle and a lot of blackberry tips and stuff for veg. But I'm not putting a ton of like super crazy. I'm not putting manures in there. All that stuff's being composted and put right on my soil. We amended in the fall with some composted horse manure we got from a neighbor. But yeah, man. So I want to know what, you said you're mostly growing veggies. I want to know what that looks like. What does a week look like? How often are you feeding JMS? How often are you feeding your veggies or your transitions or your flowers? And then it's the same for your ganja crop. How is that different for the ganja? And then more, I want to hear more about those ppm meters. Where should those ferments be testing at? What are those numbers? Should they be testing at? And I know we've talked about Jadam talks in the book about a 2-year-old ferment being twice as powerful. And let's talk about that, because I know you have some thoughts on that. So I want to hear you hit on all these things while we've got you here.
All right, for sure. That's a packed question, Joey. No, I'm just kidding. So for me, I don't know where to start. Where do you want me to start? Because that was a big.
The ppm meters, explain what those are, because most farmers are not using these. Most natural farmers, people making ferments, are completely clueless about this. And what you just said about measuring all these different inputs into your dilution barrel and making a complete feed, I think that's missed by a lot of people because they don't know how to use these
Right.
ppm meters. So if you could explain that, where that should, where those and where a good veg feed should be at,
Yeah. So for me, the ppm reader, I use that when since I started growing in San Diego. I grew with guys and it's funny that I use like cutting edge solutions like nutrients, and then like later on in life I meet John and he like lives right down the road, and so it's just like he's a really good guy. If you're going to support one company in the cannabis industry, support Cutting Edge. Those guys are like actual G's. Like they're like, John's a G. You sit down and talk to him for like an hour and you're like, damn, like I haven't done shit. But anyways, so basically for me, like the ppm meter, I think strongly associates itself with like agronomy to start with, and understanding of like what the plant can take in, like in a foliar feed, because I do like to foliar feed a lot of things. And that's where I do mix some of KNF with Jadam. And I'll go into that a little bit later. And I do the KNF, but I do it for specific periods and I use it for specific things. After harvesting, when I'm trying to bring on new flushes of flowers and things like that, and I actually need those hormones to trick the plant to be able to do that. But for my base nutrient, what we were kind of talking about earlier, every single time I water my plants, I am fertilizing. Because for me, I am kind of like closer to the Applegate River. And so I'm kind of like, I'm a mix of soils in the sense of like, I have a lot of like bedrock from the river, but it's mixed with clay. So wherever that bedrock is and wherever that constant amount of water is, I do have a tendency to have like, I don't know what you would call it, but like nutrient drop, in a sense of like the nutrition actually falls out of the range of the roots and it's not accessible. So I have to be kind of like, water for an hour and a half or something like that. And for me, I want to be able to provide nutrition. How I look at it is like the plant's out there busting its ass all day. It wants some nutrition. It'd be like you coming home from a hard day's worth of work and you get like a Pop-Tart or something like that. Like, so I want to be able to give it constant nutrition, but also not create a faux de gras type of situation where it's just sitting in a nutritional soup, right? Like I want it to be able to breathe and to reach out and be like hungry to look for more nutrition also. But for me, like, again, that ppm meter it's been able to use it for exactly like what you're talking about, Joey, of like not burning your plants, but being able to give nutrition to your plants in a bioavailable way that they can actually uptake, and they can uptake immediately and at the actual levels that they need to be able to uptake it at. So what do I mean by that? Like calcium. In a foliar fashion, a plant can actually uptake 200 parts per million, which if you understand parts per million or EC levels and things like that, that's like a very minuscule amount of nutrition, right? The same could be said with like magnesium or like a sea salt type of thing. You only need 100 milligrams of that to actually, for the plant to be able to metabolize that and to be able to use that, right? So again, Joey, like what we're dealing with right now, I'm doing basically like what would be like a 7-4-4 mix with my feed, because what are we in? We're in vegetative stage, like I'm talking for my peppers. And when I talk about peppers, the same can be applied to ganja. It's like there's nothing changes there. The only thing that changes is that peppers are like ever flowering and they're ever producing, right? But so you're kind of like, you're going back to the vegetative stage, building up to the budding stage, and then the flower where you're actually harvesting. But the actual amount that you're feeding is very similar in the sense of like ppm ranges and things like that. So I'm normally hitting the peppers, I'll hit them with like an 800 parts per million, like a 700 parts per million amount of like a nitrogen feed, so like a feather meal. Then I'll pull about 400 parts per million of fishbone meal. And then from there, I'll put in my water soluble, I'll put in around 200 to 300 parts per million of that water soluble potassium, right? And then I'll add in a little bit of sea salt and things like that. But again, I'm using this, I don't want to ever be exceeding, especially in this growth stage. And I can calculate this down a little bit, but like if I'm hitting early veg stage, I don't want my total parts per million to exceed 800, 900. The plant can't metabolize that. You're taking a small kid to a big buffet and you're paying an adult price. They're not going to uptake that. So then once you move on a little bit more, you can move that up to around 1,000 to 1,200. And then when you're finally at your final feed of like, hey, this thing's like actually taking on nutrition, you can go up to like 15, 16. And you're not going to burn your plant. You're not going to create like a toxicity issue or thing like that. And again, this is just vegetative stage. We can go into like flower and things like that, and kind of like how I move like KNF into that also. But yeah, these meters, and I'm sorry I'm jumping around here a little bit, but the meters also are really important of understanding when you are creating a JLF, like how strong is that JLF? And this is a thing that I kind of like butt heads with some of the people in the Jadam community, because it's like they just read the book and it's like that's literally all they've done is read the book. They haven't put this into practice. And when it comes down to it, is that every single one of your JLFs not only will have a different EC level, or when you hear EC or parts per million level, think about it as like your charge, like your power that you have in that vessel, which is your JLF bucket. So when you're creating something that's out of like let's talk about nitrogen. When you're creating a JLF that's based off of like feather meal or something that's made out of grass, and you were to apply those at the same levels that they're recommending you in the book, you could be having massively different results. Why? Because that finished feather meal, will have a EC level, or a parts per million level of like 8,000 parts per million, where the grass parts per million could be like 2,000 or 3,000. So how do you know how to feed these things if there's that massive range of discrepancy? I mean, they're both nitrogen JLFs, but you would never feed those in the same way. 1 gallon of feather meal JLF to 1 gallon of grass, you might think you're feeding. You could be burning a plant and you could be underfeeding another. So that's where the ppm meter comes in, because it's exact. You understand that there's a total amount of diluted solution or whatever. I think it's a total. What is that shit called? I need to. They call them EC meters and TDS meters. Also, I'm blanking on what the TDS part of it means, but it's basically the actual amount of electric conductivity that's charged in that vessel that you can actually measure on a readout. And then that readout can be added into your final, your water, your solution. And then from there you can test out. And again, you can build your regiment to whatever you're feeding. So that's the part where I wish in the Jadam book, they could add in this, very crucial part of it, because, you know, there are ways, if you want to do this like homeopathic of like, hey, if you're doing a grass JLF, you could probably dump out half of that JLF, feed it, and you're never going to have any burn issues. I had like Alika, I think 2 years ago. He's like, bro, I'm feeding straight JLF to the plants. I was like, you're doing what? He's like, yeah, I'm feeding straight JLF to the plants. And I was like, hey, find a ppm meter and just do me a little favor and just check and see what it is. And he checked, he found one and checked days on. He was like, oh, bro, it's reading out at like 200 or 300 or 400. I was like, yeah. So that is a very homeopathic amount of nutrition that you're giving out to the plant. And he was in flower. Like, that's when you really need to be hitting those higher levels of higher. And then he immediately like went in and added more biomass to his JLF, and he, you know, corrected that. But again, I just think that these meters can be used not only in the feed side of things, but then also understanding like your nutrition and understanding when a JLF is actually cached. And this is the last part of your question, I think, Joey, is that if you have a JLF and you've had it for 2 years and it has 5 different Instagram posts, but it's only at 300 parts per million, I'm sorry, brother, but there's nothing in there. That's completely cached. So what you can do is you can keep adding in material and you can recharge that again. And when you add in more material, you also add in more biology, and then you can restart that thing. But on the opposite tip, if you've had a JLF and you made it and it's been sitting for 2 years and you have not used it, again, let's not play witchcraft with it. Throw a ppm meter in there and see, because the book can say one thing, but there's lots of books in this world that say lots of different things, and they're not true. So ppm meter, that's how I look at it. That's like, it's like the gavel in the courtroom. You know what I mean? It's like there's no room for bullshit. This is what it is. This is the actual energy that's been created out of that. So you're not playing this like guessing game of, and again, you can use this system as your base nutrient. And like you said, like we've done before, we go into the grow store and we're like, oh, hey, I've got a little bit of experience. I know what this is used for. And now we can enter nature, or on a large scale ag, we can tap into organic amendments that have already been prepared for us. Now we just know how to use these in the correct parts per million at the correct growth stage. And that's basically what I use it for. I hope that answers.
What's the number of your ppm? What's the number of the ppm for the plants that are required?
You were saying you during early veg, you're around 800 ppm. Where are you going? Like right now, our full terms are pretty big. They're getting close to getting into transition time. What would you be feeding a full term right now?
Yeah, so I would basically like top those out at like a 15 or like a 16, especially if you're doing full terms and they have like full roots and they're actually feeding, like actively feeding. I'd say you could easily do that. And then from there, like, 16. I don't know how much you guys use this, but like you can create agronomic like conversions in ChatGPT, like of how, like if you see on a bottle or you see on a nutrient a 744 or a 855, like you can come down, break that down, and then have that in actual parts per million that you would need of nitrogen, of phosphorus, of potassium, and it's all those. It's all right there for you. So
gotta love ChatGPT.
Bro, it's fucking, I was so against it. I was like, this is just going to turn, like, my brain's going to turn to mush. Fuck that, dude. My shit, like, it has really, if you know what to ask it and you can really be, like, articulate, like, what you were wanting to know and kind of, like, manipulate it a little bit. It's
I have ChatGPT.
pretty nice.
I have ChatGPT. I put in, like, regiments, and I'm like, hey, make this regiment, look professional, and it's like, I'm like, I'll do like a planting SOP, and I'm like, I don't want to go through and like I went to college, you know, and it takes hours to go through and
well, and their equations, bro.
Yeah.
Like I'm not a mathematician. Like I literally wanted to quit high school over math. Like put me in a history class, put me in a
I got another question.
philosophy class, and like let me tear it up. But math, like fuck that. And this allows you to be able to be like, hey, I have this solution. I'm trying to create this. And then honestly too, of asking and trying to source different areas of understanding like nutritional uptake. That's something I think in the community, the growing community, like because it's crazy going from different parts of ag and then coming back to cannabis. And like, we just have a lot of work to do on the educational side of soil.
So I have a question.
Honestly, dude,
when you're talking like uptake and you're making like your fish bone meal, right? Like, so like at week 3, I'll go in and I'll feed bone meal, right? In a compost tea, and you know, expecting that it's going to take 2 to like 3 weeks for that bone meal to start breaking down within the soil.
Oh, yeah.
No. It's just biologically available right there already. Like
when it's in liquid form.
No, but like it's like a liquid bone meal, right? And I'm putting it in compost. But if you were to make like your JLF bone meal, then it's already like when you feed it, it's already active the moment you feed it. So I could go like week 5 and just boom, hit it with the JLF bone meal and not have to be like, I know it's gonna need it in 2 weeks, do it now kind of thing. And you know where that's already at.
Yeah, and the thing about applying like dry amendments, especially if it's like potassium, when is that going to be uptaken? Like, and when did you apply it? Did you apply it in January? Did you apply it in May? Are you applying it right now? Like, because I guarantee you, if you're applying it right now, like your plant's not going to uptake that unless you're cycling unless you're cycling microbes through that, like with that type of system, a JMS or a lab type system. But
that's why I've always been like applying lab every week to just make sure there's microbes there to cycle nutrients that they need. Because I've always been like, how do you know it's going to get it exactly right now? Why I've always fallen back on like cutting edge to just like, okay, that's like the stop guard right here. Boom. We know we at least got this covered because we're giving it cutting edge through it, and started using less cutting edge as like getting more comfortable using things. But
understanding that the reason why you are using that is because they've done the calculations for you.
They have, yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? But here, you can do the calculations for yourself. And I don't want to take business away from John, but like,
no. John's not going to lose any business because I'm using less cutting edge on my.
Well, yeah. I just think you're becoming more educated as like a farmer of like.
Well, we're making a niche product, you know what I mean? I think it's like if I were to grow a bunch of outdoor in Grodan, I would use cutting edge all day. I think it's superior to any other bottle fed nutrient out there, and it produces high quality flower. But because we don't grow in Grodan, we have the luxury to use other things that benefit our situation that Grodan cannot take advantage of. So I look at it that way that hey, I get to use this. I just fit the pieces together in the best way that's going to make sense for the final end product. And there's plenty of people. I smelled like even at this weekend at Joey's thing, there was some guy that had some rosin that he had grown indoor, and I was like, this was indoor? I'm like, holy cow. I'm like, he's like, yeah, drip hydro, the whole thing. And I was like, totally changed my perspective on terps on indoor stuff. I'm like, this is some of the nicest rosin and flower that I've smelled just off of like a drip hydro system.
Yeah.
You know.
Hey,
I have another question. What's the best PPM product that you can recommend? Because most of them are, not reading right when you do it. So what do you recommend?
I'll pull it up right now. It's the great thing about it is because I'm sure like all of us like we're fucking medicated throughout the day, so like turning off batteries like that is not optimal. So I get these it's basically like a stick. It's from Blue Lab, but I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, just the Blue Lab TDS meter, yeah.
Oh, that one.
Those are really good because I just think they're like easy to clean off. Like you can have them in the field and like put them in their little case and go about your business or test a line of things and then go back and put it inside or something like that. And again, you have to worry about turning it off, which for me is
Blue Lab makes like the 3-in-1 where it's like pH, EC, and TDS or ppm.
but they're not in the pin form.
They're not. Okay. I guess I have the pH pen. Maybe it's just EC
and honestly at that point, like, I mean, I don't know about you, but like pH really isn't like, I haven't tested my pH in years.
Oh,
like,
really? Yeah.
I mean,
pH.
Yeah, I have those pH. I only use it once.
if you're dealing in a microbially rich soil, they're moderating pH. If you're growing in a Grodan situation or something like that, yeah, pH is more of a factor and things like that. But yeah, I just think you just need to have, like I said, like a TDS meter. Oh shit.
Thank you.
Is that air dryer bust?
Nice.
Just to be scientifically accurate, I measure my pH of my soil and my water every year, and I measure my pH every month, and I write it down on a chart. I was raised by vegetable farmers and people that were reaching traditional markets decades ago, and they always were very strict about the tradition of keeping an analytical log for soil and an analytical log for water. You always assume with microbes it's going to be balanced, but I use these practices. So I always have reference points. Like I know what pH my well is at every year, depending on what time of year it is, things like that. Just, they might be minute, but there's still going to be slight variations, you know? And so
yeah, I could definitely see being on a well system. You definitely want to check that out. Coming off
it's just the system of keeping records.
Yeah. I'm getting.
It's just a system of keeping records. It doesn't matter what source of water you have. Yeah. It's just a system. It's just a tool. Not everyone has to use it. But what I use is a record keeping tool where no matter what my water sources are, I send them out for testing and I do my own testing, and same with soil. And I just keep a very scientific review and log of all my projects. It's not the standard. I realize that. In vegetable farming,
do you notice a fluctuation in that pH off your records?
What does it fluctuate?
Yeah, have you noticed any fluctuation on any of those that you would take?
Yeah, it goes up in the later part of the year, and it's sweeter in the spring winter runoff, and then it goes. It's at perfect sweetness, 6.8, 6.9 during the winter and during the springtime, and then during the summer it will go to about 7.2. And I'm not worried about it either. Like, I agree with the microbe systems. I just was passed as an agronomist education a decade ago, and that's just one of the steps that we encourage people to use. And I'm not encouraging you guys. I'm just saying that's what I use in my system, and what I work with my communities on is just scientific data.
Yeah. Well, I think we pull off, I think well-wise, I mean, we definitely pull off, but we're pulling off the same water source. Like I'm pulling off a canal that's off like Thompson Creek.
What? We're neighbors?
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So basically, just like you're saying, I'm not noticing that fluctuation. I've done the tests on it, but like you're saying, we're so lucky in this area, and that's a great thing that you're bringing up, because honestly, it doesn't apply to me, but it doesn't apply to me, right? Like it doesn't apply to like where we're going in the sense, like it doesn't fluctuate. We're not dealing with or we're not dealing with like some Salinas, California water or something like that. Shout out to all the people in Salinas, California, but you know what I mean? Like
or even Sterling Creek water, our neighbors in the same neighborhoods, or even the neighborhoods over on Coleman Creek.
Bro, you know, the folks out in Cave Junction, dude, that are dealing with.
And that's only 20 minutes from us that we're referring to. And those people have to do major water remediation projects sometimes to get it to ag standards.
Yeah. We're lucky.
That's the reason there. Yeah, I was that farm that I was at for years, I inherited from an old vegetable farmer named Andrew Saharnis. He still kicks it around at the well springs and stuff.
Yeah.
he used to be at the farmer's market back in the day. He's an old Greek dude that was and a vegetable farmer on the Big Island, and one of the early organic movers of the cultural movement out west when it started returning back to the ag lands. And so that's where those old guys are the ones that pass that on to me. And I kind of have some kind of dusty parts of my career from those bros, like Peaceful Valley Ag and Migo Bob, rest in peace. And they're the ones that are, but they weren't as educated to the microbe farming that our generation is. So there's definitely a cross of information here where we don't have to be as responsible to pHs and these things that the old organic farmers had to, I believe, because we have more tools and more information for microbes in this era.
Yeah, and I think too, how they used to work fields out here, especially in Southern Oregon, like the hay fields and stuff like that. They used to rip them in the winter time, and then they let all this, but not acidic rain, but they let rain just fall and fall and fall, and there's nothing like microbially that it can actually do to not only almost to like change, because they're like changing the pH of the soil at that point. You know what I mean? And I found out here that if you can allow places, because I do gardening, I mean, I do farm and I do tillage and things like that, but I definitely know that when I plant into fallow ground for the next year that has had cover crop that's just overgrown or whatever like that, like it's amazing how the soil can rebound here in Southern Oregon, right? And especially when you already have kind of created this like aggregate of fungal activity and stuff like that. I think, and there's a podcast on John Kemp, who talked to Christine Jones from Australia, talked about this, about being able to use certain type of cultivation at a certain depth, but as long as you actually had some type of bacterial or fungal aggregate that you've created, that would actually reach back up into the soil. You can't allow that soil to be barren. You have to apply another cover crop to it, but you can use certain type of tillage. I just think too, like, I know in the cannabis industry, like the no-till part of like things like really, really caught on, but I think it's also understanding like too, in a no-till system, like you could be actually doing more damage than good, in the sense that if you're coming on to like compacted land and then you're putting a no-till system in, things like that, like your plants will never actually reach in. I mean, they're going to get to a certain level in the soil profile and then they're just going to spread out, so I think there's a lot of detrimental things sometimes in the community, like in the regenerative community, so to say. But I think that if we can be regenerating microbes and we can be creating these inoculants, we can take some of what came from the old school, which was really like hard work ethic, like being salt of the earth. Like those are some of the things that I wish we could like bring back into the community. And I think that comes with doing hard, honest work, like not fucking people over, like, and when you work with the land and you actually have to like sculpt that land and like be with that land, like you kind of get like cleansed in the sense too, if you're in the right atmosphere. So yeah, I totally agree with you, man. The amount of people like I've been able to tap into that are like old farmers here in Southern Oregon, like they've completely changed my thought process on growing or like even interacting with the ag world in general. So always be in debt to this place for sure.
Hey guys, heading out of here. I gotta take care of some stuff on the farm, but just want to say thank you again, Joey, for having me on, and it's a pleasure talking about you guys.
Yeah, brother.
Have a good day, man. Happy
thank you, brother.
To all you guys, and
thank you, man. All of you, man.
You guys are growing your full terms, man. Happy transition. Start seeing you guys. Talk to you guys later. Peace.
Peace, brother.
Yeah. Thanks again to Eric, Humboldt Kind Farms. He won first place at our Cured Cup qualifier this last weekend, and stoked to have him sharing some knowledge with us, and all of you guys been throwing it down today. Thank you so much. Been 2 full hours. I got one more question I want to kind of throw your guys' way. One more thought in my head before we kind of wrap things up and let you guys go. It's the hottest part of the day. It's 100 degrees here right now in Middletown. I don't know how hot it is there, but it's 324. It's hot. You mentioned it earlier, Logan, kind of at the beginning when you jumped on, and I'm bummed Tamara left because she talks about this all the time, but nutrient density. You talked about nutrient density in cannabis and in food, and that's what really matters. That's what it all really comes down to as far as effect, whether it's a healing effect or a nourishing effect or whatever that effect is. And we certainly see that in herbalism. Tamara talks about it all the time. And I'm really curious your guys' thoughts on that. You know, we all seem to feed our soil differently and similar ways, and have different ways of getting nutrition into the microbes, into the plants. And yeah, curious on your guys' thoughts on nutrient density, how that plays a role in long-term cannabinoid preservation, those minor cannabinoids. That's something I've really been thinking about lately as we're trying to perfect this art of curing cannabis and long-term preserving outdoor flower and getting the most experience out of it. We're constantly thinking about how do we preserve those minor terpenes, and is nutrient density an important part of that? Does it all come back to feeding the soil and healthy soil? Does that really lead to everything? Anyways, I'm curious about your guys' thoughts on that. Go ahead.
Go ahead, brother.
Oh, Josh, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah. I mean, like, so first, I just always like to speak to the publication called Acres. All of my agriculture information and knowledge that I really, really apply at a scientific level comes from vegetables and from fruit. I did not learn this stuff from the cannabis crowd. That's why I'm, anyways. So, like, they say, oh, that takes twice as many tomatoes. They say that even a carrot, I've heard some extreme reports that 1 carrot has the same nutrient density as 50 carrots as our grandparents' era. These are pretty extreme reports. Of course, we're talking about like industrialized farming. But when I started reading this stuff and reading the reports of the nutrient loss in our soils and in our food systems, I felt like that was what I wanted to create my career around. So I think it's a really important thing to focus on in our lives. It's the same with our minds. We want to have good ideas. We want to read good books. We want to have good thoughts. We want to have positive belief systems. And it takes all those layers to create that sound mind, to create that wisdom. And I believe it's the same with the soil and creating a biodiverse soil system that's going to have the ability to provide the electroconductivity, to provide the cation exchange, to provide the balanced level of nutrient uptake that's needed for that plant and for those mycelium pathways to be communicating to each other. So yeah, no, it's kind of the cornerstone of my business is that nutrition and focusing on plant and soil nutrition. I like to grow vegetables and other medicinal herbal plants next to my cannabis to demonstrate the soil health and vitality of the plant. Because if you can cook a tomato sauce out of the same hash field and it's the most flavorful tomato sauce you've ever made, just like it's the most flavorful hashish you've ever made, you really know that you're on the right path now. So I don't just trust cannabis to be my road marker when it comes to nutrition and density in my crops. I want to reflect on all of them. I want to juice all of them. I want to study all of them to make sure that they're arriving at that place of true full terpenes and health.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, that's what it's all about right there. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that, Logan? Nutrient density in the soil.
Yeah, I think that's I think we can look at it at the scale that he was talking about, in the sense of like the amount of disease and sickness and things like that we're dealing with nowadays. The malnutrition, so to say, even though we live in an area with like abundant food, a lot of that food is like just like hollow. And that's what I use these systems like on a to grow peppers, to grow corn, to grow alfalfa. So I'm seeing this on different scales, in the sense of like the preservation, in the sense of like I go out and I can pick peppers, and I can like the store time on those peppers, how long that those can sit with my customers, and not go bad, right? That's what I'm looking for. And I started seeing that 2 years ago, when I would go out, pick, and put produce in my garage because I didn't have anywhere else to put it. And 2 or 3 days later, I'm still having that same firmness to it. A week later, I'm having that same firmness to it. So for me, I just think that growing with these type of systems, I mean, that's literally what plants are doing. Like, they're breaking down nutrition in the soil, and they're storing it in the produce. And we're taking all that nutrition off the field every single year. So if we can find ways of replenishing this nutrition, like the plants will give it, as long as networks have been established, microbial networks and things like that, and there's the proper nutrition in the soil, you will create this nutrient density. I just think that, for me, you're not going to find that in synthetics, because with synthetics, you can bypass the microbes. You can just basically put this in this faux de gras type of nutritional soup, and the plant will just perform. But again, I don't think you're sourcing certain things that in a microbial sense that you could be pulling and extracting out of soils. Again, like in the wine industry, people that are growing in like limestone type of environments, how great and how well would that be able to transfer, in the sense that you could be providing microbial rich inoculants instead of even fertigating? You don't even have to give nutrition, because everything is literally there in the soil. It just needs to be processed by those microbes. So, I don't know. I think that's the basis of what I'm trying to do, especially like in the growing chili peppers and providing them to like food trucks here in the area. Is like, I want to be like, people can source jalapeno peppers and habanero peppers directly from Mexico all day long at a cheaper price. But when you can get that flavonoid profile, and when you can get that spice, and they're like, oh damn, I don't need to use like 10 peppers, I'm gonna use like 2 or 3. Like, I want to be known as that guy, even though that might like hurt my sales or whatever. But that's providing like nutrient dense produce to areas that honestly, like here in this community, are like they're basically like food deserts. Like West Medford is like a basic like food desert, with the amount of like farmers markets and things that are around here in these areas. They're mostly in like affluent areas. So you have a lot of areas in like West Medford that are more like migrant populations, that they're buying produce from Walmart, like in Southern Oregon, in a place where like we can literally provide for all of this valley. They're buying produce in Walmart. So
for a lot of money.
For a lot of money, yeah, exactly. So I'm trying to like infiltrate. Like I'm gonna this year I got a contract to sell to El Gallo. You probably know that spot.
Yeah.
But trying to throw in some nutritional peppers at a good price for folks, and not trying to slap on this is organic, or this is regenerative, or this is whatever. Like, no, these are peppers at like a good price. Like kill it. You know what I mean? Like have a great day. So I think that's kind of the stuff I'm trying to do.
You're the man, dude. That's the way.
Yeah, but you should come by, bro. You're like right by my spot.
No, thanks. Yeah, no, we got to cross paths. I'd really like to link up. Yeah, there's a chili that is grown in New Mexico. It's called the Chimayo chili. And my bro and our family cannabis and horse ranch is down the road from there. And we grow a high elevation hashish down there at like 5,500 feet. And the Chimayo chili it's been grown for like 300 years in this one teeny little region. And it's the same families have the same heirloom chili, and they have the same Chimayo seeds, and no one else has them on the planet. And a lot of people in the chili world think that the best chili in the world comes from New Mexico, but then there's an elite chili within New Mexico called the Chimayo chili, and the queens and the kings and all the royalty around the world have these in their kitchens. They sell for several times more per pound than the regular chili. Unfortunately, of course, there's been hacks and people have stolen art images, copyrights, and they've infiltrated it into like false boutique grocery stores that are not representing the actual traditional family, because there's like only 4 or 5 families that hold the traditional seeds, the traditional and the tradition of farming it. And in New Mexico, they don't water their chili crop; they wait for the rain. So you really taste the earth in that and so yeah, I just always think of like when you're talking like that, there's always a corner for us to really celebrate something fantastic, I think, in agriculture.
Yeah, and honestly, it sucks, but it's just what it is out here. A lot of people that live in those areas, they don't have access to farmland. Like they, that's they're barely getting by, like paying rent. You know what I mean? So to even think about them being able to like invest in land because a lot of these people come from a tradition of wanting to, like, even just if they have a little plot of land, like they have like corn in the backyard or something like that. So um yeah, it's crazy to break down, especially here in Southern Oregon, and some of the history like out here. I'm really glad that I've lived out here for 8 years and always wanted to grow something in the Applegate Valley, like of my own, So I feel like super blessed just to be in between the Provolt store and the Applegate store. That's a good life, bro.
Cool. Yeah, it is.
We definitely got to link you guys up. I'm really glad both you guys were able to get on here together, because Southern Oregon's got an incredible farming community, and some of our favorite genetics and hash and flower has been coming out of there the last bunch of years.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, right on. Well, my God, you guys are amazing. You guys really threw it down today. This has been over 2 hours we've been going. You guys
So
crushed it.
I might as well say it. I slipped away to the post office. Woo!
Well, thanks for coming back in and joining us, Josh. And yeah, we'll be doing lots more of these. So I hope you guys can join us for some future ones and let us know how your season's going and your new garden, Josh, and everything you guys got going on. Yeah. Wow. We didn't get to even touch on everything we want to talk about today. Where can people reach you guys? How can we put in a nice plug for you guys? Josh at cannabis.fine on Instagram. Where else can people reach you, Josh? What do you got going on? Where are we going to see you next?
Let's see. I am probably going to go up to the DFO Legends event, and Michael at the Michigan event has been asking me to show up. So I'm trying to be more available for the greater culture and community. I've definitely stayed in my own lane, private, for like 15 years. The last 2 years, I got onto the internet for the first time, got into Instagram, got into public, speaking for the first time. And at this time, just trying to keep that door open, and, grateful for the larger community as a whole right now. So I'm not quite organized on a public platform other than Instagram. But I do like to keep my farm open. If someone has time and can respectfully take the time to come over and come through, I do keep space also for the community like that.
Yeah, reach out to Josh, support him when you can, hit him up when you see he's got good stuff going on, or reach out and link up. Good guy, good hash, good flower, Southern Oregon. And hopefully you're going to make it down back for our next event, August 16th, possibly. Keep that
I hope
up.
to be there. Yeah, it's my goal to be there. There's nothing cooler for me than like smelling those terps on the Bay Air is like it. I don't know. It sets back those early memories of me going down to San Francisco to learn about cannabis, get involved in the movement culturally, and get into those those beautiful genetics, and like it just brings all those memories back. And I love the experience being down there, Joe. It's a really cool culture, man. Yeah.
Thank you, brother. You gave a great talk this last weekend, and we look forward to having you back many more times and having you share with us many more times.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. All right, Logan. Yeah, where can people reach you? Chilterpiece on Instagram, correct?
Yeah, Chilter Pierce. Chilter Pierce.
The Pierce.
Yeah. And just basically, the same. I'm in the same boat. I think I've really tried to kind of like be more private with what I'm actually like trying to do, and make sure that I can actually put some like data behind like the work that I'm doing, and just provide people with glimpses and stuff like that. But yeah, anyone wants to reach out, regenerative projects, whether it's with wine, whether it's with vineyards, whether it's with pastures, livestock. That's the kind of stuff that I really want to start doing regenerative projects on a larger area. I'm gonna head out to Texas here in August. That's where I'm originally from, but I haven't lived there since I was 15. But it's nice to tap into. I think people out in the South, they become aware of things when it kind of hits their bottom line, and I think there's just a lot of areas where people are like open to more like regenerative ways of doing things, and I'm really grateful for what I've learned in this area and the people that I've like been able to interact with and ththings like that. But at a certain time too, like the valley is only this big, and I think I have the tools and things like that I'd like to be able to do this on kind of like a bigger scale, and work with different like agricultural commodities, so that's what I'm going to go do in Texas. I'm going to go visit a couple vineyards and do some talking and see what happens out of that. And I don't know, we'll see what happens, but yeah, I appreciate you, Joey. I appreciate you for inviting me in and making a new contact. That'll be fun, brother. I want to definitely tap in with you since you're local. But yeah, thanks, Joey. Appreciate you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely, Logan. I hope you'll make it down to Oakland for one of these events as well. We're going to try to do these seed swaps every month, and love to get you to come down and share some of your good work with us.
Yeah, brother.
Pleasure.
Yeah, hopefully I can get a little ride from Jay down there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, bro, it's fun, dude. I got this trip mapped out, man.
Oh, nice.
I love Northern California. Joey lives right next to the hot springs.
Jeez.
Yeah, man, life's good down here.
Come on down. Hey, Bert, are you still there? Did we lose Bert?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I'm just watching these two legends right here. All of you, three actually, three.
In, Bert.
for the knowledge, Thank you for all the knowledge that you've been.
Bert, hop back
Yeah.
and just tell us about the competition this weekend. You did a great job. You were our lead judge and ran our competition. You took all the entries. You got the tables all dialed for the judges. Made sure everybody was comfortable all day. Yeah, and you did an excellent job, Bert. I just want to give you some love and some praise. And
Well, thank you.
higher entries. Had some difficult math to do at the end of the day there after smoking all those fine entries, but you did a great job. What'd you think? How'd the day go for you?
I'm getting stoned with this. Anyway, yeah, thank you for them, man. You guys are all inspiration, man. Cannabis fine, second place right there. Man, I wish I could smoke your hash, man. But it's all gone. And also, Logan, thank you for the knowledge that you shared to us. That was amazing. It helps a lot. Really helps a lot. And thank you, Joey, for always for the opportunity that you gave to everyone on the community. You're amazing, man. Thank you. Like everything's unexpected. Like it just happens. Let's follow the path. Thank you all. Well, that's all I want to say.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job, Bert, and we look forward to doing many more of those Cured Cup qualifiers with you. And yeah,
Let's make it even better.
next August 16th from 3 to 8 p.m. That's on the Friday before the Emerald Cup. The Emerald Cup is in Oakland this year on the 17th and 18th. And we're going to be partying the night before at the Lotus Church for the next Regen Sesh. So I hope people will come on out. Two floors of vendors, killer food, farm fresh. We have our friend Kristen there with her regeneratively grown ganja-fed pork, just as good as it gets. We had a Turped Out Kitchen there this last weekend with their tacos. We had a whole room with wellness healers in it, and of course, some of the best regenerative farmers in the Pacific Northwest were there throwing it down, and just a really good time, man. The Bay Area definitely has its number of sessions, but this was certainly more of an educational event and a really nice community gathering, people of all ages, and a lot of smiles and good vibes all day. No egos, just all really kind folks sharing with each other and showing some of the best of humanity and taking our own health into our own hands. And yeah, it was a really beautiful time. We look forward to doing many more. Big ups to the Lotus Church for hosting us. And big thanks to everyone that came out, all our sponsors, gave some awesome prizes for our winners. And yeah, thank you guys for making some time today during the hottest part of the day. I think it's going to cool down here in a couple hours. I'll be able to start going outside again. But yeah, love you guys. Appreciate you. This will be hitting the Patreon for a couple of days and then probably be going live on YouTube and IG at the end of the week. So love you guys. Appreciate you. We'll do it again soon.
I love you.
Peace, brother.
Bye, brother.
You guys too.
All right. Take care.
All right.